My parents forced me to ruin my career for my sister after a hit and run. Before we begin the story, make sure to subscribe to our channel and never miss more incredible stories every day. I spent 10 years becoming a surgeon and exactly 10 minutes destroying it for a sister who didn't even care. The human hand is incredibly complex. 27 bones, 34 muscles, over 100 ligaments. I spent my 20s learning how to repair them, enduring sleep deprivation, grueling exams, and brutal rotations. But the day the hospital administrator asked for my badge, my own hands were trembling so violently I could barely unclip it from my scrubs. "I'm sorry, Elias," Dr. Aris had said, his voice stripped of the warmth he usually reserved for his favorite surgical resident. "Hospital policy. With a pending felony conviction, we have to terminate your residency immediately." The sterile, fluorescent lighting of the admin office felt like a physical weight pressing down on my chest. 10 years. 10 years of missing holidays, ignoring my own health, and drowning in student debt, completely wiped out by a single, catastrophic lie. I walked out of those sliding glass doors a ghost, stripped of the only identity that ever mattered to me. How did I get here? It started exactly 3 weeks earlier, at 2:14 a.m. on a Tuesday. I was in my cramped apartment, finally sleeping after a 36-hour shift, when my phone shattered the silence. The caller ID flashed my mother's name, Helen. She never called at that hour unless someone was dying. I answered, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Elias, you need to come to the house right now," she whispered. Her voice wasn't just panicked, it was breathless, edged with a terrifying, ragged desperation. "It's Chloe. There's been an accident. Please, Elias, hurry." I didn't ask questions. I threw on jeans and drove like a madman to the affluent suburb where I grew up, a place I usually avoided. I assumed a medical emergency. I assumed my medical training was what they needed. I had no idea that what they actually needed was a scapegoat. The iron gates of my parents' mansion were already open when I arrived, the driveway eerily quiet. I ran through the front doors, my medical bag clutched tightly in my hand, expecting blood, expecting broken bones. Instead, I found a completely different kind of nightmare waiting for me inside. To understand how easily they threw me to the wolves, you have to understand the dynamic of my family. Chloe, at 24, was the golden child. I, at 29, was the insurance policy. Growing up, my father, Arthur, measured our worth in two completely different currencies. Chloe was his beautiful, charismatic prize. She wanted to be an influencer, a career that so far consisted of maxing out his credit cards on designer bags and posting curated pictures from yachts. When she wrecked her first car at 16, he bought her a nicer one so she wouldn't feel traumatized. When she failed college courses, the professors were unreasonable. Me? I had to earn every single scrap of affection through flawless academic achievement. If I brought home an A-, I was grounded. "You're the man of the family, Elias." My father would lecture, swirling his expensive scotch. "You have to be the rock, the reliable one." Reliable meant compliant. It meant keeping my head down, sacrificing my youth to build a solid, respectable career that would reflect well on the family name, while Chloe was free to be as reckless as she pleased. I developed a strict moral compass early on, mostly as a defense mechanism against their chaotic indulgence of her. In surgery, there is no gray area. You either make the right cut, or someone bleeds out. Accountability is absolute. But in my parents' sprawling, sterile mansion, accountability was something only I had to shoulder. So when I burst into the living room that fateful night, my medical bag ready, I immediately saw the familiar signs of my family's toxic ecosystem. Chloe wasn't bleeding. She was pacing the Persian rug, clutching a glass of water, her mascara smeared down her cheeks. My mother, Helen, was hovering over her, stroking her hair as if Chloe were a frightened toddler. My father was on the phone, his face pale, his voice an urgent, hushed hiss. There was no medical emergency here at all. The heavy scent of panic mixed with expensive perfume hung in the air, suffocating the entire room. I slowly realized that I was not summoned here to heal, but to be sacrificed. "What happened?" I demanded, dropping my bag. Chloe let out a theatrical sob and buried her face in my mother's shoulder. My father snapped his flip phone shut. He always kept a burner for business, and turned to me. "She had an accident," Arthur said, his tone entirely too steady for the situation. A dark road on the edge of town. An animal ran out. She swerved and clipped a parked car. I frowned, the adrenaline draining from my system, replaced by confusion. A parked car? Then why did you call me like she was dying? Did you call the police? Helen shot up, her eyes flashing with a wild, desperate energy. No. No police, Elias. You know how fragile she is. A hit and run on her record? It would ruin her brand, her future, everything. I stared at them, completely stunned. She drove away? Dad, you have to report this. That was when the trap snapped shut. My father grabbed my shoulders, his grip bruising. We are reporting it. But she wasn't driving. You were. The room spun. I tried to back away, but he held tight. You were exhausted from your shift, my mother pleaded, tears streaming down her face, weaponizing my empathy. You took her car. You fell asleep for a second. It's just property damage, Elias. You have a clean record. You'll get a slap on the wrist. If she goes down for this, she'll never survive the stress. I refused. I fought them for an hour. But then came the financial threats. The loans my father co-signed for my medical school? He would default on them tomorrow. The private investigators he would hire to drag my name through the mud. And my mother's endless, suffocating tears, begging me to save my little sister just this once. Under the crushing weight of exhaustion, manipulation, and a lifelong conditioning to be the protector, my resolve finally broke. I agreed to call the precinct. I picked up the phone, completely unaware I was signing away the rest of my life. Taking the plea deal was the most humiliating experience of my life. I stood in a crowded courtroom, the fluorescent lights buzzing over my head, and lied under oath. I confessed to a misdemeanor hit and run, accepting the prosecutor's deal to avoid a protracted trial. The judge, an older man with stern eyes, looked at me with profound disappointment. A doctor should know better, he had said, banging his gavel. The fine was exorbitant, the community service hours staggering, but the collateral damage was absolute. Within 48 hours of my guilty plea, the state medical board suspended my license pending a full ethical review. The hospital didn't even wait for the review. They terminated my residency with a standardized 2-paragraph letter. 10 years of study vanished. My apartment lease was suddenly a financial impossibility. I had to sell my car just to cover the legal fees my father conveniently forgot to reimburse me for. For the first 2 weeks, I lived in a state of numb shock. I convinced myself I had done a noble thing. I was the strong older brother who took a bullet for his fragile sibling. I survived on cheap ramen, ignored calls from confused colleagues, and spent hours staring blankly at the wall of my rapidly emptying apartment. My parents barely called, citing the stress of the ordeal, but they assured me they were infinitely grateful. I believed the lie of my own martyrdom until the loneliness became too deafening to bear. Seeking just a shred of the family warmth I had supposedly bought with my career, I decided to take the bus out to the suburbs to see them. I expected a quiet house, maybe a home-cooked meal, and a tearful thank you from the sister I had saved. I walked the mile from the bus stop in the pouring rain, my coat soaked through, rehearsing what I might say to my mother to ask for a small loan just to keep my electricity on. I was a doctor who couldn't even afford to keep the lights on. I approached the long, winding driveway of my parents' estate, expecting the solemn, quiet atmosphere of a family recovering from a near-miss catastrophe. Instead of a quiet home, loud party music vibrated violently through the heavy glass doors. I pushed open the heavy mahogany doors, and the sheer volume of the music physically pushed me back. The foyer was filled with people I didn't know, 20-somethings in designer clothes, holding expensive champagne flutes, laughing uproariously. Caterers in crisp white shirts wove through the crowd with trays of caviar and crostini. In the center of the living room, standing on a suede ottoman, was Chloe. She was wearing a sparkling new dress, holding a shot glass high in the air, shouting something about living your best life for an Instagram reel. She looked radiant. She looked utterly untouched by the fact that my entire life had just been burned to the ground in her name. The sheer, blinding audacity of it paralyzed me. Before I could say a word, my mother materialized from the kitchen. She wasn't wearing her usual stressed frown. She was glowing, draped in pearls. When she saw my soaking wet coat and haggard face, her smile instantly evaporated into a look of profound annoyance. "Elias, what are you doing here?" she hissed, grabbing my elbow and pulling me into the hallway, out of sight of the guests. You didn't call. I stared at her, water dripping from my hair onto the hardwood floor. My electricity is getting shut off tomorrow, Mom. And Chloe is throwing a gala? My mother sighed, an exasperated, put-upon sound. It's a celebration. She's been under so much stress lately, Elias. She needed a release. And honestly, your gloomy energy is just going to ruin her vibe tonight. My father walked up, sipping a drink. Look, son, we appreciate what you did, but you need to handle your own affairs now. Stop dwelling on the past. I was standing in a puddle of rainwater in the house I had sacrificed my soul for. The blind resentment that flared in my chest finally cracked my noble delusion wide open. The next morning, the anger had metastasized into a cold, clinical suspicion. If they could casually discard me while throwing a champagne bash, what else were they lying about? Up until now, I had purposefully avoided looking at the official police report. The shame was too intense. I had just parroted the story my father gave me to the prosecutor. I swerved, I hit a parked sedan, I panicked, and drove away. But sitting in a dingy public library, using their free Wi-Fi, I logged into the county court's public records database. My hands shook as I typed in my own case number. I pulled up the arresting officer's initial incident report and began to read. My medical training kicked in, my eyes scanning the text for vital information. But there was no mention of a parked car. My blood turned to absolute ice. The report detailed a dispatch to the edge of town regarding an injured pedestrian found in a drainage ditch. The victim, a 42-year-old father of 3 named Marcus Miller, hadn't been in a car. He had been walking his dog. According to the medical annex, he suffered a shattered pelvis, a collapsed lung, and severe traumatic brain injury. He was currently on life support at a facility less than 5 miles from the library I was sitting in. I couldn't breathe. The library walls felt like they were closing in to crush me. Chloe didn't hit a parked car. She hit a human being. She destroyed a man's body, left him in a ditch to die, and my parents orchestrated a cover-up. They made me confess to a property crime, knowing the prosecutor was overwhelmed and didn't cross-reference the John Doe hit-and-run with my fender-bender confession across town. The crushing weight of the guilt was agonizing. I had unwittingly protected a monster who left a father bleeding in the dirt. I rushed out of the library, violently sick to my stomach from the horrifying truth. I didn't call. I took an Uber straight to my father's office downtown. I marched past his shocked secretary and threw the printed police report directly onto his polished mahogany desk. "A parked car, Dad," I screamed, my voice cracking. "Marcus Miller is in a coma. You made me cover up a near-fatal hit-and-run." Arthur didn't even flinch. He calmly picked up the paper, shredded it in the machine beneath his desk, and looked at me with dead, empty eyes. "Keep your voice down, Elias. You confessed to a property crime on the west side. This incident was on the south side. They are unrelated." I slammed my hands on the desk. "Stop lying. It was her. I know it was her." My father stood up, his imposing frame casting a shadow. "You are unstable, Elias. You lost your job, you're stressed, and you're imagining things. If you ever utter this nonsense again, I will personally see to it that you are committed for a psychiatric evaluation." He had security escort me out of the building. I was shaking with fury, completely stonewalled. I needed physical proof. A few days later, while packing up my apartment, I found a piece of mail I had accidentally taken from their house weeks ago, a joint bank statement my father used for household expenses. I had never opened it, but now, I ripped the envelope apart. I scanned the lines of luxury purchases until a massive, glaring anomaly jumped out at me. A single charge for $35,000 to Apex Custom Restorations, an auto body shop located 3 counties over. My parents drove brand-new luxury leases that were serviced directly by the dealership, fully covered by premium insurance. There was absolutely no legitimate reason for a massive, out-of-pocket expense at a sketchy, remote custom shop just 2 days after the accident. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to lock together with terrifying precision. Chloe's car, a pristine white Range Rover, had mysteriously gone into the shop for transmission issues the very morning after they dragged me out of bed. I folded the bank statement, realizing exactly where my sister's battered vehicle had been hidden. It took me 3 buses and 2 hours to reach Apex Custom Restorations. It wasn't a sleek garage. It was a sprawling, rusted-out compound surrounded by a high chain-link fence topped with barbed wire. located in an industrial wasteland. I waited across the street at a greasy diner for hours, drinking terrible coffee, just watching the gates. Around noon, I saw a familiar flatbed tow truck pull in. When the garage doors rolled open, I got my confirmation. Sitting inside the dark bay, partially covered by a tarp, was a white Range Rover. I couldn't get close enough to see the license plate, but I didn't need to. Through the camera lens of my phone, zoomed in as far as it would go, I saw the catastrophic front-end damage. The grille was completely caved in, the hood was crumpled like cheap tin foil, and the passenger side windshield was entirely shattered. A parked car didn't do that kind of damage. A human body did. My stomach violently churned as I visualized the impact necessary to shatter that reinforced safety glass. I watched a mechanic in greasy overalls hand a clipboard to a man in a suit who looked exactly like one of my father's corporate fixers. They were paying cash to make the evidence disappear entirely. I snapped as many photos as I could, but I knew grainy pictures from across a highway wouldn't be enough to overturn my conviction or bring them down. I needed the undeniable smoking gun. And then I remembered my father's obsession with liability. He had installed high-end, unerasable dual dashcams in all our vehicles for insurance purposes. Those cameras were hardwired directly into the car's electrical system, constantly recording to an encrypted hard drive hidden under the passenger seat. If the mechanic was just replacing the bumper and glass, they might not have thought to rip out the internal data drive. Or, knowing my paranoid father, Arthur had already retrieved the drive himself to ensure the footage never saw the light of day. Either way, that digital record existed somewhere. I knew exactly where my paranoid father would hide the encrypted footage. I waited until Thursday night, knowing my parents always attended a weekly charity gala downtown. I parked 2 blocks away and slipped through the wooded backyard of my childhood home. I still had the emergency key hidden inside the hollow fake rock near the patio. The house was pitch black and deathly silent. I crept directly up the carpeted stairs to my father's home office. The mahogany door was locked, but my medical ID badge, the very thing they made me forfeit, proved useful one last time. I slid it perfectly along the door frame and popped the latch. I turned on a small pen light and went straight to the heavy oak bookcase. My father was a creature of habit. Behind a row of leather-bound encyclopedias, he kept a small biometric fire safe. Fortunately, years ago, he had programmed my thumbprint into it in case of a family emergency. The green light flashed. Inside, resting on stacks of bearer bonds, was a sleek, black external hard drive. My hands were shaking so violently, I nearly dropped it. I plugged it into his desktop computer. There was only one video file, time-stamped the night of the crash. I double-clicked it. The video was crystal clear. It showed the dark, winding road. The internal audio captured the deafening, pulsing beat of club music inside the cabin. And then, Chloe's voice. She was slurring her words heavily, laughing hysterically at a text message on her phone, which she was holding directly in front of the steering wheel. She never even looked up. The impact was sickeningly loud. A man's figure briefly illuminated in the headlights before being violently thrown over the hood, his head smashing against the glass. Chloe screamed, hit the brakes, and then, the part that finally shattered my soul. She looked at the broken body in the ditch, let out a bizarre, drunken giggle, and slammed her foot on the gas. I watched my sister leave a man to die, knowing I had to destroy her. I downloaded the file onto a secure flash drive, put the hard drive back exactly as I found it, and slipped out of the house like a ghost. For 3 days, I didn't sleep. The horrific sound of that impact replayed in my head on an endless, torturous loop. The anger was no longer a fire. It was a cold, absolute glacier. But a small, pathetic part of me still wanted to believe my mother was innocent, that Arthur had bullied her into this cover-up too. I caught her alone on Tuesday morning, leaving her luxury Pilates class. I ambushed her in the parking lot. "Mom, we need to talk," I said, blocking the door to her Mercedes. She sighed, adjusting her designer sunglasses. "Elias, please. I am exhausted." I leaned in close. "I know about Marcus Miller. I know Chloe hit him. I know she was drunk." Helen froze. The perfectly manicured mask slipped for just a fraction of a second, revealing the terrifying, calculating machinery underneath. She didn't look shocked. She looked inconvenienced. She took off her glasses, her eyes as cold as polished steel. And what exactly do you think you're going to do with this wild imagination of yours, Elias? She asked quietly. I'm going to the police, I stated firmly. I'm going to tell them everything. She let out a dry, humorless laugh. No, you won't. You were born to protect your sister. That is your purpose in this family. If you try to change your story now, we will hire the best lawyers in the country to destroy you. We will say you are a disgruntled doctor trying to extort us. We will say you stole her car, hit that man, and are now trying to frame her because you resent her success. Who do you think a jury will believe? The wealthy, upstanding parents, or the desperate, broke ex-convict who already confessed on the record? Her words were a physical blow, meticulously designed to paralyze me with fear. She patted my cheek with a patronizing, chilling affection. Go home to your little apartment, Elias, and accept your fate. As she drove away, the last shred of my familial love evaporated into pure, calculated vengeance. The gloves were entirely off. My parents had made it abundantly clear that they would gladly watch me rot in a prison cell rather than let their golden child face a single consequence. I couldn't just walk into a police precinct and hand over the flash drive. My mother was right. Arthur's expensive lawyers would immediately claim the footage was an elaborate, AI-generated deepfake created by a vindictive, unstable son. They would bury the evidence in endless legal motions. I needed something irrefutable. I needed them to confess on tape. I dug through my court documents until I found the name of the original investigating officer on the John Doe hit-and-run, Detective Vance. He had a reputation for being a relentless, sharp investigator who hated unsolved cases. I called him from a burner phone. I didn't give him my name, but I gave him enough details about the Marcus Miller case. Details not released to the press, like the specific paint transfer found at the scene, to secure an off-the-books meeting in a quiet diner on the outskirts of the city. Vance was a tired-looking man in his 40s with eyes that missed absolutely nothing. He listened quietly as I laid out the entire conspiracy, watching my face for any sign of deception. You're Elias, he finally said, taking a sip of black coffee. The doctor who pled down a fender bender across town. I always suspected that timeline was garbage. I slid a small, encrypted audio recorder across the sticky table. I have video proof, I told him. But I know it's not enough to bypass their legal team. I need you to help me lay a trap to catch them confessing in their own words. Vance looked at the recorder, then back at me, a slow, grim smile spreading across his face. If you try to entrap them without official authorization, it's inadmissible in court. But if you were to simply wear a wire under my direct supervision during a consensual conversation, well, that's a completely different story. Are you absolutely sure you want to do this, kid? Once we cross this line, you are going to blow your entire family to pieces. I looked him directly in the eye and agreed to light the match. The perfect opportunity presented itself 3 weeks later, Chloe's lavish engagement dinner. She was marrying a wealthy real estate developer, and my parents had rented out the entire private wing of the most exclusive steakhouse in the city. The guest list was packed with 50 of their closest, most influential friends. It was the ultimate stage for their curated, perfect family image. I wasn't invited, naturally, but that was exactly what I was counting on. Detective Vance parked his unmarked sedan in the alleyway behind the restaurant. Inside the dark car, he meticulously taped a flat, high-definition microphone to my chest, running the wire down my torso. Test check, Vance muttered, adjusting his headphones. Loud and clear, I whispered back. The plan was incredibly dangerous. I had to bypass security, walk into a room full of hostile people, and emotionally manipulate master manipulators into admitting their felonies on a live police feed. I ruffled my hair, untucked my cheap shirt, and practiced the desperate, broken look of a man who had finally hit absolute rock bottom. I needed them to feel completely superior, completely safe in their power over me. I walked through the service entrance, slipping past the busy waiters, and pushed open the heavy oak doors of the private dining room. The immediate silence was deafening. 50 heads turned to stare at me. The clinking of crystal glasses stopped abruptly. Chloe, dressed in blinding white silk, let out a loud gasp of horror. Arthur stood up violently from the head of the long table, his face flushing crimson with absolute fury. What the hell is the meaning of this? My father roared, throwing his heavy linen napkin onto his half-eaten steak. Guards, get him out. I didn't retreat. I forced tears to well up in my eyes, sinking my shoulders in a posture of complete, pathetic defeat. I fell to my knees right in the center of the Persian rug, in front of the entire assembly. Please, I sobbed loudly, ensuring the microphone picked up every single tremor in my voice. Please, Dad. I'm going to be evicted tomorrow. I have nothing left. I just need a little money for a lawyer to try and get my medical license back. The room held its breath as my father stepped forward to make his fatal mistake. Arthur glared down at me, utterly disgusted by my display of weakness. He loved an audience, and he couldn't resist the chance to perform his dominance. I told you, Elias, he sneered, his voice projecting across the silent room. We owe you absolutely nothing. You made your choices. I looked up at Chloe, who was hiding a smirk behind her champagne flute. Chloe, please, I begged, making my voice crack. I ruined my entire life for you. You were drunk. You hit that man, Marcus Miller, and I took the fall so you wouldn't go to prison. You owe me. The crowd gasped. Chloe's eyes widened, but her vanity and deeply ingrained arrogance overrode her caution. She stepped out from behind her fiancé. Are you insane? She laughed, a shrill, mocking sound. I didn't make you do anything, Elias. You agreed to take the charge because you knew my brand would be ruined. Nobody forced you to talk to the cops. And honestly, getting away with it just proves I'm meant for better things than a jail cell. Bingo. A direct, voluntary admission of guilt and fleeing the scene. But I needed Arthur. I turned back to him, sobbing harder. But Dad, you hit her car. You paid Apex Restorations $35,000 to fix the blood and the dented hood. That makes you an accessory. Arthur leaned in close, his face inches from mine, his voice a lethal whisper that the wire caught perfectly. Yes, I paid off the mechanic. And I'd do it again. I bought your sister's freedom, and I bought your silence. Now get the hell out of here before I have you arrested for trespassing. I stopped crying instantly. The pathetic posture vanished. I stood up slowly, brushing the dust off my knees, and looked directly into my father's eyes with a cold, terrifying calm. You don't have to call the police, Arthur, I said quietly, my voice echoing in the dead silence of the room. I reached into my jacket, pulled out the sleek black flash drive containing the unedited dashcam footage, and held it up for the entire room to see. I already brought them with me. I turned toward the heavy oak doors and gave a sharp, deliberate nod. The heavy dining room doors violently burst open, revealing the flashing red and blue lights. Detective Vance strode into the room, flanked by 6 uniformed police officers. The atmosphere in the dining room instantly shattered into absolute chaos. Guests shrieked and scrambled away from the tables. Arthur lunged at me, his face twisted in pure, animalistic rage, but 2 officers immediately tackled him to the floor, driving his face into the expensive carpet. Arthur Vance, you are under arrest for obstruction of justice, tampering with evidence, and bribery, Detective Vance announced, his voice booming over the screaming. Helen collapsed into a chair, wailing hysterically as an officer roughly pulled her hands behind her back to cuff her. But the most satisfying moment was watching Chloe. The golden child, the untouchable influencer, dropped her champagne glass. It shattered, splattering across her pristine white silk dress. She fell to the floor, hyperventilating, screaming that it was a mistake, that her makeup was ruined, that she couldn't go to jail because she had a brand deal pending. Chloe, Vance said coldly, snapping the cold steel cuffs onto her wrists. You are under arrest for felony hit and run, reckless driving, and aggravated assault. Amidst the pandemonium, I walked calmly over to Detective Vance. The 50 elite guests watched in stunned silence as I handed him the encrypted flash drive. Here is the raw dashcam footage, Detective, I said loudly, making sure every single person in the room heard me. It clearly shows her driving intoxicated, hitting the victim, and fleeing the scene laughing. The color completely drained from Arthur's face as he was dragged to his feet. He realized, in that exact moment, that his empire of lies was completely decimated. They had played God with my life, and I had just burned their heaven to the ground. As the police hauled my screaming, thrashing family out through the kitchen service corridor, the sheer silence that followed in the dining room was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. I walked out into the cool night air, finally breathing as a truly free man. The aftermath was a media bloodbath. With the undeniable audio confession from The Wire and the brutal dashcam footage, The prosecutor didn't even need a trial. To avoid public humiliation, Arthur and Helen took heavy plea deals. 3 years in federal prison for conspiracy and witness tampering, plus massive fines that essentially bankrupted their estate. Chloe wasn't so lucky. The judge made an example out of her complete lack of remorse. She was sentenced to 8 years in a state penitentiary. I visited her once, just to look at her through the glass, and then I blocked her number forever. As for me, the district attorney completely expunged my record. It took another brutal year of legal appeals, hearings, and character testimonies to finally get my medical license reinstated. The hospital that fired me didn't offer my residency back, but a smaller clinic across the state, impressed by my resilience and the highly publicized exoneration, gave me a second chance. It's been 2 years since that night. I'm a fully licensed surgeon now. I work long hours, but when I save a life, I know the credit belongs solely to my own hard work. Marcus Miller miraculously woke from his coma. The settlement money from my parents' seized assets paid for his extensive rehabilitation. We occasionally exchange holiday cards. I learned the hard way that blood does not automatically make you family. Sometimes, the people who are supposed to protect you are the exact ones holding the knife. Loyalty is a beautiful trait, but blind loyalty to toxic people is just a slow form of suicide. I lost everything to learn that lesson, but I rebuilt my life on a foundation of absolute truth. I don't have a massive mansion or a trust fund, but I have my integrity, my career, and the quiet peace of knowing I sleep with a clean conscience. To anyone out there drowning in guilt because they are constantly sacrificing themselves to protect family members who would gladly step over their dead body, stop. You are not their shield, and you are not their scapegoat. Cut the cord. Walking away from my family was the most agonizing surgery that saved my life.